Hey guys, I have another knife video. Usually I don't really do a lot of knife videos, but if I get a knife that I really love, like previously, the last knife video I did was my Sebenza, I figured I'd do a video on it, and this one is no exception. You can see it's a Boker Plus box, and it is model 01B0, well no, 01BO730, made in China, like I believe almost all of the Boker Plus line. I don't know. I don't remember if they have any stuff made in Taiwan. But anyway, even though it's made in China, the quality on this has been fantastic. It's the documentation. I figure I'd just show you the box. And here's the knife. This is Boker's Urban Trapper, designed by Brad Zinker. I had never really heard of his stuff, but then again, I've kind of been out of the knife world for several years now. But you know, after I saw this knife, I went ahead and I looked at some of his custom work, and you know, it's very similar. A lot of it is very similar to this. Very thin knives, narrow, like almost gentleman style knives, with very like thin blades. I mean, obviously, as a custom maker, he has free reign to make a lot of a variety of different knives. I believe he makes fixed blades as well, but his stuff looks pretty good. Priced, you know, for me, I've never been a huge custom knife maker kind of guy. I've always kind of preferred production knives just because of cost. You know, for me, knives are tools and not pieces of art. You know, and I'm not a huge fan of over elaborate like knife handle designs and stuff. You know, like one of the reasons why I like the Sebenza so much is because of how simple it is. It's just made very well. And, you know, I kind of feel like the quality in that knife justifies the price. But this knife is really nice. Here's how it is in the box. And they actually include a Torx driver here for you to adjust the pivot, which is pretty nice. I have Torx driver sets, so not a huge deal for me. But for someone who doesn't have that kind of stuff, it'd be pretty good. But here's the knife. Like I said, it's really narrow. It's really narrow and it's really thin, and the blade itself is actually very thin as well. You can see here side profile of the blade, super narrow blade is which makes this more of like a gentleman's knife for me, not necessarily like a hard use knife. You know, you definitely won't see me like kind of carving into wood and stuff with this. It has a really long blade. The blade is, the cutting edge at least, is just under 3.5 inches, which for the weight is insane. It has titanium handle scales that have like a really nice stone washing on them, and it also has a VG10 blade. It's steeled blade. Right there, you can see VG10 and Brad Zinker's logo. I like VG10. It's probably one of my favorite steels. You know, even compared to like the super steels that I have, you know, the S30Vs, the ZDP 189s. VG10 I feel is like a really good compromise between how fine of an edge it can take, how long it can hold it, and how easy it is to sharpen. I haven't had that much experience with this because, you know, this is a first impressions video and I just got the knife. But, you know, most of my experience with VG10 comes from Spyderco, and, you know, their VG10 at least is heat treated really well. I'm hoping it'll be the same for this Boker. Out of box sharpness, one side has a slight burr to it, and you can just see how, like, polished that blade is. You can see me behind the camera. It has a very slight burr on one side, so basically the burr is actually on the show side here. You know, when you shave, you can it's actually sharp enough to pop hairs off this side, but it doesn't really quite shave as well on this side. This side kind of grabs a little more than the other side. But you know, in all honesty, for something like paper cutting and stuff, it's been working out pretty well. I don't have any. Oh, here's a receipt that I don't think I need. You know, it because especially with how thin it is, and even with that slight burr, it'll still slice through paper and cut through things no problem. I'll probably have to touch up the edge a little bit. For a blade this thin, I don't think I'm necessarily going to regrind it, but I'll just touch up the edge and polish it up a little bit and remove the burr so it, you know, it's you know, hair shaving sharp on both sides. It has a super high polished blade, which is kind of cool because you can kind of see it through the holes that's drilled out into the handles. And one of the reasons why I think this knife is as light as it is, considering it has metal metal handles, is because of all these holes drilled out on it. And actually, if you look under the clip, you can also see, like, under the clip there's additional holes drilled underneath the metal where the cutout for the frame lock isn't at. This kind of reminds me a lot of like butterfly knives, balisongs. A lot of them have the same like kind of hole pattern drilled out, although usually all the same size. This one you can see they kind of get smaller, then it gets bigger in the middle and then gets smaller again, but then again you have like the large holes and the two holes between those larger holes drilled out. It just reminds me a lot like the butterfly knives. Usually I like really simple knives. This is a little bit flashy, but honestly, for the weight, I don't mind at all. And with that nicely polished hollow ground blade underneath it, it makes for a really nice contrast, I think. One thing to note about it, the weight, is that it is super lightweight. This knife, when I first got it out of the box, I was like, wow, I was amazed. It weighs in on my kitchen scale at like 1.7 ounces, which, for comparison, the Sebenza weighs in, I think, at 2.8 ounces, and this is substantial. Now, I don't want to say that the small Sebenza actually weighs a lot. For me, it doesn't weigh that much in pocket. It's not like my Emerson, Kershaw Emerson model like 6. Like, that one weighs a lot. That's like over 5 ounces. You can feel that in your pocket. For this weight, like 2.8 ounces, you don't really feel it in your pocket that much, and and you're getting a very substantial locking knife, compared to like an ultra light knife that I have. This is kind of my ultra light reference. It's a Spyderco Dragonfly in ZDP. May or may not do a video on this. It's really nice. It makes for a really nice EDC knife just because of how small it is. It has a deep, a relatively deep pocket carry. The paperclip style clip, super nice blade for everyday tasks, and the ZDP takes and holds a really nice edge. It takes a little effort to sharpen, but not a huge deal if you have diamonds and ceramics. But this thing, this was my reference lightweight knife. This thing weighs in at like 1.15, 1.2 ounces. So this Urban Trapper only weighs around half an ounce more, but like the blade length that you get is substantial in comparison. If you look at the blade length, it's basically almost double the blade length, cutting edge wise, as the Dragonfly. Because of how wide this blade is in the pivot, I feel like this might handle hard cutting, harder use a little bit better. But for regular daily tasks like cutting open mail, peeling and slicing fruit, or kitchen prep work, even like cutting up cardboard, processing cardboard for recycling or whatever, it's probably the hardest thing that I'll use my knives for on a regular basis anyway. I can see no problems with this knife handling it very well. It has a really nice deep carry pocket clip. I'm not a huge fan of these super wide spoon clips, and especially with this thinness of a knife handle, I feel it kind of ruins the aesthetics a little bit, but it works okay. It has good tension to it. Deep carry, basically the entire knife is hidden away in your pocket. So in terms of the looks, I don't really like the looks that much. It could be worse. At least it's not like Kershaw's spoon style pocket clip with like Kershaw right across it. It's very plain. Also stonewashed. Yeah, it's also slightly stonewashed. Not as rough as the handle, but matches well enough. So I don't mind the clip. It's a flipper style knife. You can see a very slight flipper tab sticking out from there. Not the best flipper in my mind. I can understand how they want to go with the whole minimalist idea, and you have a very tiny flipper, so it doesn't really protrude out, and it doesn't really ruin the lines that much. From what I've seen though, Brad's custom work actually has a much more proud flipper onto it, where you can actually get it and flip it out quite well. I know a lot of people who, this knife hasn't really seen a lot of press or video reviews or even like forum reviews for some reason, which is strange considering you're getting a titanium handled knife and with a decent steel for like $80 shipped. Hasn't gotten a lot of reviews, but what I've seen from the videos and forum posts is that people have a hard time with this flipper. You can see a lot of times you'll get that act like it won't open up all the way. There are a few things that kind of go against using such a small flipper. One is the detent is really weak. You can actually really easily shake this knife out. And when you have a knife that works off of a flipper design, you need a strong detent there to build up energy. And then once you build up enough energy, it'll basically pop out of its place in the detent and the blade will fly out. With weak detent, especially with such a small flipper, it makes it a little tough. Another thing to note is that when you're trying to use this knife and using the flipper, if you're holding up against the frame lock, you're going to be pushing the detent really hard against the blade, and at that point it's just super difficult to open. And with the detent on the frame here, as you're pushing against it, you know, if you have too heavy of a detent and too light of a blade and too small of a flipper, the blade won't open all the way because the detent will basically be pushing against the side of the blade and preventing it, you know, from opening it. It'll be taking away energy that it could be using to pop out. So what you want to do is you want to hold it basically on the non-lock side of the frame, or you can hold it up against the pocket clip, and then, you know, you don't, with the ball bearings system that it has in the pivot, you don't need to use any wrist whatsoever to open this knife. You know, it's very smooth. You can see the detent just kind of pops the blade in. There we go. Oh, and also because of how thin the blade is, you can see like between the flipper and this part, this flat of the blade, you don't really have a lot of space. So if you just push against the flipper tab inwards, eventually what's going to happen is the bottom of the blade will just contact your finger and prevent it from opening all the way. So you want to do a nice, basically you want to do a nice downward motions on it, and it opens up with no problems. With the jimping on the flipper and how small it is and how hard you kind of have to press against it, it does kind of wear away at the fingertip a little bit. Not a huge deal. It leads me to my other point where, you know, considering this is called the Urban Trapper, I guess, and the blade style is a little reminiscent of some of the old school slip joint pocket knives. Actually, let me get one. Too many knives in the knife drawer. So here we have a very extreme example, but my case peanut. So you can see, like, the blade style is very very reminiscent of it, kind of. This obviously isn't a trapper, but if you look at a trapper blade, it's basically like a larger version of this blade. It's very similar. And with that in mind, and the kind of difficult to use flipper, I kind of wish that they added like a thumbnail nick somewhere along this blade. You know, you can see, you know, a thumb stud maybe may ruin the aesthetics of it, but you can see there's a lot of space here along the blade that sticks out of the handle that all you have to do is add like a very small thumbnail nick. And with how smooth and easy the knife is to open with the ball bearing system, you know, you could just basically use this almost like a two-handed knife. With this super high polish, it's really tough to get a good grip on the knife, you know, as you can see. So with that nail nick, it would have made it super simple. You can use this basically as a two-handed knife and open it. I may or may not grind that into the blade myself. Personally, I don't really want to ruin it because of how nicely polished it is, but you know, if it bothers me that much, I may go ahead and do that. But yeah, first impressions of this knife. It's really nice. If you can deal with all these holes on it, definitely suggest it if you need something that's more of like a medium, light to medium weight, like working knife. You know, like I said, I wouldn't necessarily use this for hard use. It does have a frame lock, but it's such a thin and narrow blade that I would be almost afraid that this might snap under hard use. In terms of the lockup, actually, also, mine locks up really, really early. You can see, like, that's how much it contacts. And even if you were to like really flick out the knife and get maximum movement on the frame lock. You can see it locks up super early. I don't necessarily think that in regular use that'll be a problem, but you know, it definitely doesn't lock up as solidly as my Sebenza. You know, the Sebenza goes basically like 50-60% of the way, and this is a nice solid lockup. And I know that Sebenzas, once they're at a certain degree of lockup, they basically stay like that for a long time without, you know, without the frame lock moving all the way to the other side of the handle. And that was one of my biggest concerns, is that you know, I've had a few Boker frame locks in the past, and the lockup and fit, it was always a little hit and miss. Sometimes you would get them lock up super late and basically have no room for wear, and after a while, you know, it just leads to blade play. This one, no up and down blade play. When I flick it open and push the frame all the way in. If I open this gently and this lock up super early, then you feel a little bit of blade play up and down when the frame is moving slightly. Side to side, there's nothing. Also, one key thing to note that is, because it's the titanium frame lock, you know, it's very springy, and there's no blade stop, and it's so narrow, it's super easy to overextend the frame. So just, you know, be a little careful about that with this knife. I like to keep my finger down here and basically act as my own frame lock stop, so I don't overextend the frame and bend it out of shape. But yeah, like I said, for $80 shipped, gorgeous knife. I love it. There are a few minor issues with it that I have, but you know, very few knives are perfect in my book, and this comes really close, especially for money, especially for the weight. It would make a great EDC knife for sure. So, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you actually go out and check this knife out if it piques your interest, and thanks for watching.